One of the accessories that you can purchase for the Ookami Gold is the convexing clamp. This clamp is just like the regular clamp for the Ookami Gold system, but this one will rotate back from a fixed stop point. It has an upright, just like the other clamp, so it can be set to the angle that you need to sharpen at. And then with this stop block in place, you can set the exact angle and then rotate back from that angle. This will allow you to sharpen a facet onto the blades. Let's go ahead and show you how this works. I've already taken apart this pair of shears, just like we took apart the original pair that we just sharpened in the first part of the video. We will clamp this blade into the clamp halfway over the pivot hole with the pivot hole to the right. You can see that this clamp is actually just a little bit narrower than the other clamp is, and we will set our clamp for about 45 degrees. Right now it's set at 40. I'm going to rotate the clamp up, set it for 45 degrees. This one, you set your clamp at the very bottom of the piece that is connected to the stop block of the clamp. We'll set that for 45. We'll lock that into position. We're going to put the clamp into the arm in the sharpen position, and we'll get ready to test this blade. So I'm going to hold this up against the wheel. I'm going to spin downward with my thumb. I'm going to check and see where I'm hitting. And I'm actually hitting, again, just like with scratch test that we looked at before, right at the very edge of the blade. So I'm going to make a pass on this wheel. Now, normally when you're sharpening a pair of shears and you only have to make one pass, like we'll probably have to do on this wheel, you've brought up a burr, it's ready to go. There's a very fine angle on this edge, almost not even discernible to a degree. Now, once you've worked the inside of the blade on the honing blocks and you've taken the burr off, and then you go back and you polish, because this is a pliable wheel on this right hand side, it's going to wrap that edge slightly, and it's going to blend any angle that's cut onto the face of the scissor back into the face of the blade, and you're done. But if you have a shear that has a very discernible angle on it, or someone has sharpened it improperly to begin with, we'll just go back and forth a few times on this wheel and bring up a much more discernible angle off of this cut. We'll need to do a little bit to this blade in order to be able to knock that angle back so it can be blended back into the front surface. So let's take a quick look at what I just created here. And you can see I have a very discernible, flattened out angle on the edge of the blade. Not as visually appealing as we'd like it for the higher end blade like this. You can also see I brought up a pretty heavy burr. So now we're going to facet the front surface of this blade. So we'll zoom back out, and what I'm going to do is we'll facet this. Now, in the instructions that come with this clamp, it shows how you can do step-ups on the clamp itself to do the faceting of the blade. And the way that you would do that is you'd start off at 45 degrees, and you'd move your angle from 45 to 50, clamp it back down, and then you'd make a pass across the wheel, and that's going to take a little bit of the backside of that angle off, not at the edge, but further back up the backside of the angle, and start a faceting. And then you'd go from 50 to 55 and make another pass. And then you could even go past 55 to about the 60 mark or so and basically do the same thing. And all you're doing is faceting that front surface, just like you'd facet a jewel or something like that. You're going to have a multiple number of angles that go up the face of the blade, and then they'll be blended back in after the fact with this wheel. What I'm going to also show you as I do this in the video is I'm going to show you just a little trick on how you can do this without having to loosen the upright every time and then change the angle. You can actually use a penny. A machinist came in one time and showed me this trick. After I've cut my initial angle on the blade, I can then slip a penny between the clamp portion of the unit and the stop block and place the penny up against the stop block. And what that's doing is, if I pull the penny out, you can see how that's going to hike up just a little bit. That's just raising that angle slightly. So now I can do the same thing that I would as if I had changed the clamp from 45 to 50 and make a very light pass across my angle, and then I can move the penny forward. I'm starting at the very bottom up against the handle. I'll move it about halfway up into the stop block area, and I'll make another light pass. and then I'll move all the way forward with the penny so that it's touching right at the humped portion right here. You can see how I have that pushed through, and that's going to raise it up just a little bit more again, and that's just going to create those faceted front surfaces on the blade itself. So now if we take a look and we zoom in just a little bit, you can see, maybe not as clearly in the tape as I'd like, but there are actually about 3 different angles that run up the face of this blade. And now at this point I can take the blade out of the clamp and do the work on the honing blocks before I come back and do the polishing step. Now that I've sharpened the first blade, we'll go ahead and pull the burr back with the deburr block, just like we did in the first video. We'll pull that burr back. Again, same thing to pull the burr back. And now we can work back and forth to recreate that inside line. Come to a complete stop before you lift off. Look at the work that you've done on the inside. Looks good. So now we'll move on to the finishing block. We'll pull back and forth to fine up that inside edge. Come to a complete stop before you lift off. Inside line looks good. So we're ready to move on to the polishing step. Back into the clamp. Again, pivot hole to the right. Halfway down into the pivot hole, and we do that in the sharpen position. We're going to lift the clamp up, flip it into the honing position. Now again, this clamp will rotate, so you can sharpen from the edge back up towards the spine of the shear, so you can do a complete polish across the entire front surface of the blade. So we'll start this up. We'll add some polishing compound to the wheel, and then we'll start by working our edge, just like sharpening any other shear. Doing a number of strokes back and forth, working the tip slightly, working the throat slightly, then finishing with some complete strokes. I'm doing this because I want to make sure that I am getting to my inside edge, and I do have the trash on the inside of the blade like we showed you at on the first portion of the video. Now though, what I'm looking at doing is reworking that front curvature of the blade. You can see already that I've started to polish out a good bit of those angles that were faceted onto the front surface of this particular blade. So I'm going to go back into the honing position again, apply some more polishing compound, and now I'm going to turn upwards slightly on the clamp, just doing this freehand, and work back and forth. I'll do the same thing again by lifting up just a little bit. Each time I'm lifting up just a little, all the way to the tip, back to the throat. Again, a little bit more of a lift. And this is again a very forgiving wheel, which is nice. That means you can get right into the throat and work the throat if you need to. You can go up and down the shear, so you can get multiple patterns as you do your work to kind of disturb any of the faceted angles that are on the front surface of this. And every time when you come all the way back down to the bottom of the stop block, you're always at your starting angle. So you don't have to worry about going past your angle on this machine. So again, back and forth, doing that extra bit of polishing. Alright, and now what we're going to want to do is just take a look at what we've created. So, we'll wipe this down. And then we'll see what the front surface looks like. If we can get a zoom in on that. There we go. And you can see, sorry about that, Ryan. My cameraman here today. You can see you've got a really nice rounded over front surface as far as the convex is concerned. You don't see any of those bevels that were created in that process. Here, let me show you an example of what the shear looked like when it came off of that initial faceted grind, and you can see you've got those angles where they've been cut into the front surface, and now they've been blended back in by the polishing wheel. So this first blade is done and ready to go. We'll go ahead and set it to the right hand side, and we'll sharpen up our next blade. Alright, now that we've polished that first blade, I've set it aside to the right hand side of the machine. I'm going to start on the second blade. We will clamp the second blade in, and we're going to do the same thing that we did to that first one. We'll start the machine up, clamp the shear in halfway over the pivot hole with the pivot hole to the right. Going to make a very light pass across that first cut on the blade. We have a burr on the first pass, so we'll go ahead and up that angle just a little bit so that we can kind of show what we're having to overcome. Now that we've done that, we will take our penny, place our penny into the clamp, make a light pass across, and this is very light pressure that I'm using. I'm letting the wheel do all the work, just very lightly across the blade, penny all the way up to the top, light pass across. I'm going to look at what I've done on the front surface, and I have faceted the front surface, so now this one is ready to go to the blocks. Now that we have sharpened our second blade, we'll start again by pulling the burr back on the deburr paper, working the inside of the shear to reestablish that inside line. Remember, you need a good inside line because of the hollow grind on the inside of the shear. Come to a complete stop before you lift off. Check the work. Looks good. We will move over to the finishing paper. Come to a complete stop again before you lift off and look. Inside line looks great, so we are ready to polish this blade as well. Alright, now that we have worked the inside of our second blade, we're going to do exactly the same thing that we did with the first one. Clamp it in, sharpen position, halfway over the pivot hole to the right, flip the clamp over from the sharpen position into the honing position. We'll start that with a little bit of polishing compound. We'll work our edge to begin with. Work my tip just a little bit. Work my throat just a little bit. Back and forth. Alright, looks good on the front. We have our trash on the back. On that inside portion. Put a little compound on there, and now we're going to go through our polishing on the front surface of the blade. Start up towards the spine. I'm going to work my way back down towards the edge. Once I get to my edge, I'll do just a few more strokes. Come away. And I'll wipe everything down. And we've got a good looking convex on this one. So now we're ready to put the shear back together, go through the tests just like we did in the first part of the video, make sure that everything cuts properly. And that's pretty much it for sharpening a shear where you have to put a new convex front surface on it with the convexing clamp on the Ookami Gold system. Very simple to use.